The first thing I heard was my mother-in-law screaming, "Don't touch that!" I froze with one hand on the small brass key hanging beside the kitchen door. Behind me, my husband, Mark, stood with his arms crossed. "Just leave, Emma," he said. "Take your clothes, take your daughter, and go. But you're not taking anything else." My heart was pounding so hard. I could barely think. 10 minutes earlier, I'd been standing in the same kitchen, trying to understand how a marriage of 8 years had turned into this. It had started over something that sounded almost ridiculous. Mark's mother, Linda, had accused me of wasting money because I'd replaced a broken washing machine without asking her permission. Reminded her that it was my house, my money, and my decision. That was when Mark walked in. Instead of defending me, he looked at his mother, then he looked at me. "You need to apologize." I actually laughed, because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. When I refused, his expression changed. "If you can't respect my mother, maybe you shouldn't be here." Those words hurt more than I wanted to admit. Our 9-year-old daughter, Lily, was standing halfway up the stairs. Listening, I looked at her, then back at Mark. "You really want me to leave?" He nodded. "Tonight." So I went upstairs. I packed Lily's clothes into one suitcase and put a few things into my own bag. I didn't take the television. I didn't take the jewelry. I didn't even take the laptop Mark had given me for Christmas. I just wanted to get my daughter out of that house. Then I walked back downstairs. As I passed the kitchen, I saw the little brass key. I had almost forgotten it existed. It had been there for years, hanging behind an old framed photograph. Reached for it, and that was when Linda screamed, "Don't you dare take that key!" Her voice was so panicked that I stopped. I turned slowly. Mark looked at her, then he looked at me. And for the first time that night, I realized something. They weren't afraid of me leaving. They were afraid of what that key could unlock. I stared at Linda, still holding the key between my fingers. "What is this?" I asked. She immediately stepped toward me. "Give it to me." That answer made my stomach tighten. Mark didn't move. "Mom, calm down," but she wasn't. "Calm." She looked at the key like I was holding something dangerous. I said, "Give it to me." "Emma," I shook my head. "No, not until someone tells me why this matters so much." For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then Mark sighed. "It's nothing." I looked at him. "Then why is your mother acting like I just found a gun?" His jaw tightened. "Because you're making this bigger than it is." That was when Lily came down the stairs. "Mom?" I immediately put the key in my pocket. "Go wait by the front door." "Sweetheart," she nodded. But I could see she was scared. Picked up our bags and walked toward the entryway. Linda followed me. "You have no right to take that." I stopped. "No, right?" She shook her head. "That key belongs to this family." Something about the way she said those words bothered me. Not Mark, not her son. "This family." I turned around. "What does it open?" Linda's face went pale. Mark stepped between us. "Emma, just go." No. I had spent 8 years being told that certain questions were none of my business. I suddenly realized I'd accepted that too easily. I looked at Mark. "What does the key open?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. Then Lily whispered from the doorway, "Mom, can we please go?" That snapped me back to reality. Whatever secret was hiding behind that key, I wasn't going to investigate it with my daughter. Standing there terrified, I took her hand. "We're leaving." Mark didn't stop. Me neither did Linda, but as I opened the front door, I heard Linda whisper something behind me. "She can't find out." I froze. Lily tugged at my hand. "Mom." I looked back. Linda was staring at Mark, and Mark was staring at the floor. Walked outside without saying another word. But I knew one thing. That key wasn't connected to some old family keepsake. It was connected to something they had deliberately kept from me. And before the night was over, I was going to find out what it was. I didn't drive far. Lily and I stopped at a small hotel about 20 minutes from home. She fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from everything she'd heard. I sat beside the window, staring at the brass key on the nightstand. I kept asking myself the same question: what could possibly be so important that Linda was terrified? I'd take it. At 11:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was Mark. I almost ignored him. Then another message appeared. Please give Mom the key. This has nothing to do with you. I stared at the screen. Nothing to do with me. That sentence made me angry. 8 years of marriage, and suddenly there was something in my own house that apparently had nothing to do with me. I called my best friend, Sarah. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked one question. Do you know where the key came from? I thought about it. The little brass key had been hanging beside an old photograph since before Lily was born. I don't know. Then find out. The next morning, I called a locksmith I trusted from work and asked him to look at the key. He couldn't tell me exactly what it opened, but he recognized the style. It looks like an older commercial lock, he said. Storage unit, office cabinet, something like that. Storage unit. Those words immediately reminded me of something. 2 years earlier, Mark had told me he'd rented a small storage unit because he needed somewhere to keep paperwork from his father's business. I had never questioned it. Searched through my old emails and found the receipt. The storage facility was less than 15 minutes away. I drove there alone. At the front office, I gave the manager the unit number. He checked his computer. Then he looked at me. Strangely, ma'am, this unit is registered under your name. My heart stopped. My name? He nodded. Emma Carter. I had never rented a storage unit in my life. Showed him my driver's license. He looked at it, then back at the screen. There's something else. What? He lowered his voice. Your husband isn't listed as the owner? I felt a coldness spread through me. Then who is? The manager hesitated. The original account holder was your grandfather. My grandfather had been dead for almost 6 years. And suddenly, the little brass key in my pocket didn't feel like a random object anymore. It felt like a message someone had been waiting for me to find. The manager led me down a narrow hallway lined with metal doors. When we reached Unit 214, he pointed at the lock. My hands started shaking. The brass key fit perfectly. For a second, I couldn't move. Then I turned. The lock clicked. Inside were several old boxes, a wooden desk, and a black filing cabinet covered with dust. There was also a framed photograph sitting on the desk. It was my grandfather. Beside him stood my father and Mark. I stared at the picture. Why is my husband here? The manager looked uncomfortable. He came here several times. Over the last few years, my stomach dropped. Mark had told me he'd never met my grandfather before we got married. I stepped inside. The first box had my grandfather's handwriting on it. For Emma, I opened it. Inside were property documents, bank statements, and an envelope with my name written across the front. Tore it open. There was a short letter. My grandfather had left me ownership of a small commercial property in town, along with an investment account. But the part that made my hands go numb was the final paragraph. He had written that he wanted the documents kept private until I was ready to manage everything myself. I read it twice, then I noticed something strange. Several pages were missing from the file. I checked the cabinet. Nothing. Then I found another folder. This one contained copies of financial transfers. My eyes moved down the page. Payments had been made from the investment account over the previous 3 years. And the authorization? Signature wasn't mine, it was Mark's. I felt sick. Called my attorney, Rachel, and sent her photographs of the documents. She told me not to confront Mark yet. Emma, preserve everything. Don't change anything in that unit. I promised I wouldn't. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. If these records are authentic, your husband may have been using assets you inherited without your permission. I looked around that dusty room. Suddenly, the argument from the night before didn't seem like the beginning of the story. It felt like the final step of a plan that had been happening behind my back for years. Then my phone rang. Mark, I answered. His voice was unusually quiet. Emma, where are you? I said nothing. He tried again. Did you open the storage unit? I looked at the documents on the desk. Then I asked the question he'd been hoping. I'd never ask. How long have you been taking money that belonged to me? There was a long silence. Then Mark whispered, I can explain, but I already knew whatever. Explanation came next was going to change my entire marriage. Mark stayed silent for so long that I thought the call had disconnected. Finally, he said, I never meant to hurt you. I almost laughed. You used my grandfather's money without asking me, was going to put it back. When? He had no answer. I ended the call. That afternoon, Rachel helped me understand what the documents meant. Mark had transferred money from the investment account to cover debts connected to a business he had secretly invested in, but there was something even worse. He'd also used the account as collateral for a loan. If I hadn't found those records, I could have lost everything my grandfather had left me. And suddenly, the little brass key made sense. My grandfather hadn't left it behind by accident. He'd left me a way to find the truth if someone ever tried to hide it from me. I filed the necessary legal paperwork, froze the remaining accounts, and made sure Lily and I had a safe place to stay. A week later, Mark asked to meet. We sat across from each other in a quiet cafe. He looked exhausted. I was ashamed. He finally said, my business was failing. I kept thinking, I could fix everything before you noticed. I shook my head. You didn't just make a mistake, Mark. You made hundreds of decisions. Without me, he lowered his eyes. Then he asked if there was any chance we could save our marriage. I told him I didn't. No, and honestly, I didn't over the next few months. He repaid what he could, cooperated with the legal process, and started counseling. But I didn't rush back. Trust wasn't something he could demand. It had to be rebuilt. One evening, Lily asked me why we weren't living together anymore. I told her the truth, in a way she could understand. Sometimes, people love each other and still make choices that hurt each other. What matters is what they do after. Months later, Mark stood in front of me with a folder containing the final repayment documents. I know this doesn't fix everything, he said, but I want you to know I'm done hiding. I looked at the brass key sitting on my desk. That tiny piece of metal had unlocked more than a storage unit. It had unlocked the truth, and I learned something. I'll never forget. When someone tells you to leave with nothing, make sure you know exactly what belongs to you before you walk away, because sometimes the smallest key can open the biggest truth. If you were in my place, would you have given Mark another chance or walked away for good? Tell me what you would have done.